What's up everybody, welcome back. So first of all, I'd like to thank everybody that voted on the poll on what videos you would like to see next. So it became really close between a character and AI, and in the beginning it kind of looked like the character was going to win, and then the AI votes caught up and now it's pretty much a tie. So what we're going to do is we're going to start working on the character XP and level system first, because I started working on that when it looked like that was the option that's going to win. And then after that we're gonna dive into adding some AI. So it kind of makes a little bit more sense this way as well, because then we have our XP system in place and then we can immediately implement that in the AI system as well. So that's what we're gonna do, and this is what we're gonna end up with. We're gonna have some levels and XP, and we're gonna have some triggers in the map that we are able to test it with, and we can level up. Everything is going to save on our profile, and then in the next videos we're going to make sure that we can lock some characters or skins behind a certain level and things like that. So let's dive into the video. So to begin with, I grabbed some rank icons to make sure that I have something to display with our ranks. I'm not sure if they fit the project that well, but at least we have something to show. So these are from flaticon.com, made by Dimitri, and I'll make sure to drop a link in the description of the video as well. So first let's create a structure again that we're going to use to define our levels. So again, we're going to go to blueprints and create a structure. So by now you probably realize that I'm crazy about structures and data tables. They just really easy way to set up things like this. So I'm going to call this my structure XP and levels and open it up. And we're going to add some arrays in here. So let's make an array, and we're going to make the first array an array of integers. And that's going to be our XP map. So it's not actually a map, but it doesn't really matter. So XP map levels. And we can actually define all of the levels in here. So I'm going to start with 10 levels, and this will be the maximum XP for this level. So level 0 doesn't really exist, so we're going to start with level 1, and that goes up to XP 500. And then for the second level I'm just going to add 500 for each XP level, so it's easy to test at this moment. And we can quickly level up, and we don't have to worry about everything taking really long. So 45 and 5000. So there we go. And then I'm also going to add another array, and that's going to be an array of 2D textures, and those are going to be my rank icons. So 2D texture. And again, we can simply add 10 elements in here, or 11, because we're not using 0. And then we can assign all of the rank icons. So let's see if we can make that happen quickly. Textures rank 1, and then plug that in here. So bear with me, we're almost here. 9, and the last one, there we go. So now we have 2 arrays, and we can simply get the correct index and find whatever value belongs to that rank. So we're gonna save and close this down. And we want to make sure that we can save our XP and level on our character profile, so we can actually save it in between games as well. So let's go to the save data folder, and we're going to add it to our player profile structure. So let's open this up, and we're going to add 2 integer variables. And the first one is going to be our player XP. And then the second one is going to be the level, so player level. And we probably want to set the default level to 1, so let's do that in here and then save it. And if we open up our actual save game, then we need to recompile it, and the defaults, they should be good. So level 1 and XP 0, that's good to go. And because we changed the structure for this, we need to make sure that we go into our framework folder and open up our game instance. So over here, if we change the player name, we have a function for that, and we do not want to override the XP if we change our player name probably. So let's make sure that we copy over these variables. And we also need to open up our menu game mode, because in here we also save our profile. Not the menu game mode, the menu controller, that's my bad. So in here we have 3 functions, and those are for storing the character model and the character class and things like that. So in here we also need to make sure that we plug in our XP and level pins. So in the save selected character, save selected model, and also in save selected skin. So everything is connected back up, and that should work. Now let's take a look at setting up something in our HUD so we can see our current level and XP. So let's open up our HUD widget and get to work in here. I'm gonna grab myself a border and drop it on the canvas panel. First let's anchor it to the bottom right, and I'm gonna align it so -75 by -125. And I've got the alignment set to 1 over here. And then I'm gonna size it so 115, 115, so something like that. And I want to make it black, so let's grab the color and I'm gonna give it some alpha so it's a bit transparent. Now inside this border I'm gonna grab a vertical box and drop it on top of here. And for the first vertical box I'm gonna grab myself another border and plug it in here. And for this border I'm gonna grab a vertical box again so we can align some stuff above each other. And we're gonna set the actual level in here. So for the second border we're gonna add some text in here. And first of all let's set the values for this text. So let me grab my example and I'm gonna set the font size to 40 and make sure that it's italic. No, not bold, just italic. And this is going to be the number of the level, so I'm just gonna set it to 0 for now. And for the second border that we grabbed over here, we also want to make sure that we make it a little bit darker. So I'm gonna set it to black again, so we can actually see our text. Now we want to make this text a variable, so I'm gonna grab it and call this my text XP level. And let's align it to the center so that looks a little bit better. And then let me see, let's just duplicate this one. And then I'm gonna go back to the actual level text and make it a variable. And the second one does not need to be a variable, so there we go. So let's remove this and I'm just gonna say level. And size it down a little bit again, so 24, maybe 20. I made it a lot smaller in my example, so let's make it 14. Something like that should do. And now let's duplicate this border. And then for the first text, we're gonna resize it back to 14 again. And let's wrap this in a horizontal box. So right click, wrap with horizontal box, and then drag the second text also inside of that horizontal box. And then we want to swap them around. So we want to have the variable as the last one in here. And then I'm going to change the text to XP. And we can set the actual XP over here. So this is going to be my text XP amount, and that should be something like this. So we can probably make this border a little bit bigger, and that's good to go. And now I also want to add an image, so I'm simply going to drag in an image right above here, and I want to use this as my rank icon. So first of all I'm going to give it a proper name. That's my rank icon. and make sure that it's a variable, so it is. And now let me just assign an icon in here real quick. So let me see, rank 1, and I want to size it, so I'm gonna make it 100 by 90. So I think it looks a little bit better if it's not squared, otherwise it looks a little bit stretched to me. So this is my rank icon, and we have it set up as a variable, so that's good to go as well. Let's compile and save it, and let's see how we're gonna set it up in the graph. So let me grab my notes quickly, and we're simply gonna create a function for this. So let's call it something like update XP amount and update XP level. So let's separate both of these functions. Let's create it, update XP amount, and we can simply grab it from our player controller. So we probably want to get a reference to that first, and I don't think we have that set up. No, we don't. So we have event construct in here with a little weight, and I don't want to mess around with it right now, so I'm gonna grab my event pre-construct. And on pre-construct, I'm gonna grab my owning player, so get owning player. And this will return the player controller, so I can cast it to my menu controller, because we're still inside of the lobbies. And from the menu controller, I'm gonna promote it to a variable. So now we can use that. So let's go back into our update XP amount function, grab our menu controller, and from the menu controller we're going to grab our player profile. And we can simply split it and get the actual XP that's stored on the profile. So then we want to get our text XP amount. And we're going to set the text, plug it in over here, and we can simply plug in the XP amount over here. And I'm going to disable the grouping, otherwise it's going to put a little dot after every third digit, so I don't want that. And that should be good to go. And now we want to update our XP level as well, so let's create a function for that. Let's duplicate this one, XP level. And we're going to make this a little bit different, because we're also going to update our rank icon if we change our level. So first of all, let's make a little bit of room here. And I want to store my player level as a local variable. So let's promote it to a local variable, local player level. And make sure it's connected. And then we could set the actual text first. So let's drop in the set text node and make sure that we change it to our XP level text. And we can grab our local XP or local player level, plug it in here, and that should be good. And then we want to update the image for our rank icon. So let's disconnect this over here, and we need to get an actual variable for our structure that we created. And we could choose to make it a local variable. Let me see, do we need it anywhere else in this menu? We might, so let's just make it a normal variable. It doesn't really matter. So this is a structure, XP and levels, and that's going to be the XP and level structure that we created in the beginning of this video. So with the structure in here, we can simply grab it, and I'm gonna split it. So this will hold all of the default variables that we set in here. So I can simply grab this array over here and get a copy from the index that's at my level that came from the player controller. So this will return the texture that we want to use, and then I can simply grab my image rank icon and set the brush from texture, plug it in here, and plug the texture in here. And that should update to the correct icon. So with these in place, we can make sure that we call them if we construct it. Let me see. So we do not need to call these functions from here. We're going to call them from our XP component that we're going to create later. So let's close this down with everything in place in the head. And let's create an interface that we're going to use for the XP. So I'm going to go to my framework folder and create a new folder in here. Call that interfaces and open it up. So right click, go to blueprints and create a blueprint interface. And I'm going to call this a BPI XP interface. And let's open it up. So the only thing we can do in here is create an empty function, and we're going to call this add XP. And this function needs an input, and that's the XP amount. So let's give it an input, call it XP amount, and turn it into an integer. And that's all we need to do in here. And now let's go to our character folder, and I'm going to open my base character. So I'm using parent-child blueprint, so I only need to add it to the base character. If you use multiple classes, then make sure you add it to each of your characters. So go to your class settings, and over here you can implement an interface. So we're going to add one, and we're going to add our BPI XP interface. And now we can make sure that we do not need to cast to a character if we want to make a call to this interface. So that's a benefit of using interfaces, and I'll show in a little bit how that actually works. First, let's create a trigger that we can place in the map so we can do a little bit of testing by adding some XP. So since we do not have any enemies yet, we need to come up with something to test. So I'm going to go to the gameplay folder and call this test. And create a new blueprint in here, and that's going to be an actor, and that's my XP trigger. And let's open this. So let's add some components. First I'm going to add a scene component, call that root, and replace it with the default scene root. And then I'm going to add a box collision in here, and that's going to be the actual trigger. So let's call that trigger. And let's resize it. So I'm going to make it something like 100 by 100 by 100 and drag it up a little bit. So what we want to do is go to the class defaults and make sure that this replicates. So enable the replicates flag over here. And we want to add a variable, and that's the XP amount that this trigger is going to add. So XP amount, that's an integer, and make sure that we set it to replicate. And we want to make it instance editable and exposed on spawn. So we can assign some different values for different triggers. And then all we need to do in the event graph is grab an event overlap. So let's go to the event graph, let's select our trigger and scroll all the way down. So over here we can grab component begin overlap. So grab this event, and let me quickly grab my example in here to make sure I don't mess up. So all we need to do in here is grab the other actor, and we want to check if this implements an interface. So we're going to do does implement interface, and we're going to check if this actor implements our BPI XP interface. So if it does, then we can call the interface function. So first let's get a branch in here, and then we can simply drag off this actor, and we do not need to cast it to anything. We can just call our add XP function, and that's the BPI interface message. So plug that in here, and then for the XP amount we want to get our variable and plug it in here, and that's good to go. So if we would go into our character right now, and on the left side over here we have a tab called interfaces, and over here is the add XP function for the interface. So if we double click it, it will create the event, and from here we can implement what happens if this interface is called. So we're going to get back to this in a little bit, but that's how that works. So let's close this down as well. Everything is saved. So all we need to do is make sure that we actually have this trigger in our map. So let's open up one of our maps and grab a viewport. And I'm going to place 2 of these triggers in here. So one is going to add something about 2 or 300 XP, and the other one is going to add a lot more, so I can test the leveling up a little bit easier. So grab the XP trigger, plug it in here, duplicate it so we have it in here twice. And then for the right one, let's set the amount to 300, and for the left one, I'm going to set it to, well, 1500 maybe, if I can select it. So 1500, there we go. So we can get rid of the viewport. The only thing I want to do inside of the XP trigger is select the actual trigger in here and make sure that we can see it in game. So I'm gonna disable hidden in game, so now it's visible. Compile and save, and that's good to go. So now let's start making our actual XP component that handles all of the XP and leveling. So to add my XP and level system, I'm going to use a component, and the reason for that is because I simply want to show there's multiple ways of doing things. It's also a little bit more clean because all of the variables and functions will be on the component and not on the actual character, so they won't be all in between each other. And if we would use multiple character classes, then I could simply drop that component inside each one of the character classes, and the character will be able to level up and use my XP system. So that's why I'm using a component in this case. So let's go to right click and create a new blueprint class, and this time we're going to select an actor component. I'm going to call this my blueprint XP component. And let's set this up first. So I'm going to get rid of whatever in here. And I'm going to create my own initialize function maybe. So let's call this something like XP component initialize. I'm sorry, I got a little bit distracted. So XP component init. And first of all, we want to get our XP map in here. So let's create a small function for that and call this setup XP map. And I'm going to create a local variable, and that's my XP and level structure. So s underscore, and that's the XP and levels. So we can drag in the local variable, get it and split it. And we want to save our array. So I'm going to promote this to a variable, and that's my XP map levels. And that's really all we need to do in here. So I'm going to return, and that's good to go. Then in the event graph, I'm going to call this first. So we set up the correct XP map with the correct values. And then I want to grab the character that owns me. So I'm going to right click and do get owner. And I want to cast this to my base character, so cast to base character. And promote this to a variable as well, so let's right click, promote to variable, and that's fine as hero base. And then I also want to make sure that I'm going to grab my player controller, so let's get a player controller. And we can simply cast this to our shooter player controller, because at this moment we are actually in the game. So cast to shooter player controller, and promote this to a variable as well. And then let's grab the actual XP and level values from our player controller, because the player controller has them stored from our save game. So this player controller, when it loads, it actually pulls the save game information and stores that on the player controller. We already set that up previously. So shooter player controller. In begin play over here at the end, we're loading our save game and storing that inside of our player profile. So we can go back to the XP component and simply grab it from here. So grab our player profile. And we can split the structure, and we want to grab the XP and the level. So we're going to promote this to a variable. So the first one is the player XP, and we want to make sure that we set it to replicate and do the same thing for the level. So promote to variable, player level, and set it to replicate as well. Plug them in here. So we have the current XP and level stored, and now we want to make sure that we update our PlayerController profile. No, that's not true. All we need to do right now is make sure that we update our HUD. So this is going to execute on all instances of the character, and we want to make sure that we grab our local character, because only the local character has a HUD. So we're going to grab our shooter player controller, and we're going to check if we are locally controlled. So is local player controller, and plug this into the branch over here. And if this is true, then we can grab the HUD reference that we have on here. So get the widget blueprint in-game HUD, and then we can call the update XP amount and XP level function. So plug it in, and that should work. So update XP level, and that's good to go. For now, we're going to create a function for adding XP as well. So let's set it up immediately. So let's go to an empty spot and create a new custom event, and simply call this add XP. Now first let's actually add the XP. So let's grab our current player XP, and let's grab a setter for it as well. And then we want to make sure this event has an input, and that's the XP amount. So XP amount, and this is an integer. So then we can add these two together. So add with the new XP amount and store that in the new player XP. So that's good to go. Now I'm going to create a function that checks if we can level up or not. So let's create a new function and call that check for level up. And we're going to create one input, and that's the XP amount. So that's the current XP amount of the player. No. And we're also going to create two outputs, and the first one is a boolean that's telling me if I can level up, and the second one is again an integer, and that's our new level. So if we can level up, maybe we skipped a level because we got so much XP that we're actually 2 levels ahead. So we're going to make sure that we can define a level as well. So can level up, and the first one is a boolean. So let's make some room in here, and we're also going to use local variables. So let's set them up as well. The first one is the local current player level, and that's an integer. And then we're going to make the local current player XP. And then we're going to create the boolean, so local can level up, and that's a boolean. Now let's start by setting up these variables. So we want to set the XP amount in the local current player XP, store this in here, and we want to grab the current level as well. So let's set the player current level, and let's grab it from the normal variable, the player level, and plug it in here. Then we want to grab a branch, and we want to check if we can level up with this amount of XP or not. So let's grab a branch in here and plug it in. And what we're going to do is we're going to grab our XP map levels, and we're going to get a copy, and we're going to use our current level as the input, so the local player current level, and this will return the maximum XP amount for this level. So if the XP that I currently have is higher than this, then I can level up. So if I would do a greater than, and simply plug in my local player current XP, so make sure that this is the other way around. So if the current XP that I'm having is bigger than the return value from the mapping, then we can level up. But we want to make sure that we're also not already level 10. So let's add an AND boolean in here and grab our current player level. and make sure that it's smaller than 10, so less than 10. So that's going to be my level cap for now, and plug it in here. So if this is true, then we can level up. So we want to set our local variable, plug it in here, and make sure that we set the top one to true. So we can actually hook up the lower one to the return node. That's good to go, and we can plug in the local variables. So this should be, let me see, the local player current level. We can use it in here as well. So now we're going to use a for loop to check how many levels we can actually level up. So let's grab a for loop with break. Not for each, but for loop with break. And we want to start at the current player index. So let's get our current player level as the first index. The last index is going to be level 10 because that's my level cap right now, and plug this in right here. And then again, we are simply going to grab our XP map levels, and we're going to get a copy of the index, and we're going to check if our current XP is bigger than this index or not. So let me see, let's grab a branch in here and get our local current XP. And if this is greater than the return of this mapping, plug it in here, then we can actually level up. So if this is false, then we can break the loop. And let me see. Yeah, if this is false, then we can break the loop because we stop leveling up. So let's grab our current player level, drag it in here, and the result of the index is going to be our new level. And then we can plug this into the break from the for each loop. So at the moment that our XP is not bigger than the return value of the array anymore, we're going to stop executing the loop, and the index that we're in at that moment is going to be our new player level. So for the false pin from the true pin, I'm sorry, we do not need to do anything, because if this is true, then we can check the next level and see if our XP is also bigger than that level. So that's what's happening in here, and then we can simply plug this in over here. So that should work. Hope that kind of makes sense. So we're going to go back to the event graph, and we're going to use this function. So let's drag it in, check for level up, plug in the XP amount, and then we can simply add a branch. So if we can level up, then we want to set our player level to the new level that's returned from here. So let's grab our player level, set it, and plug it into the true pin. And if this is false, we only want to update our PlayerController profile. So we want to make sure this is going to execute on both the server and the local player. And we want to store all of the information on both of the controllers. So we do not need to worry about on what instance of the character we are right now. We are simply going to create a function and call this update player controller profile. And we're going to use this to store our new XP and level variables. So first we're going to grab our menu controller and get our player profile. And we want to split it. And then we also want to grab a setter. So set player profile and split this as well. And then we can simply plug in all of the pins except for the XP and the level. So let's copy all of the information over. And for the XP and level, we're going to grab it from here. So plug in the player XP and the player level. And that's good to go. So let's return, compile, save, and go to the event graph. So we want to update our player controller profile in both cases. So let's hook them up like this. And then we want to make sure that we update our HUD again. So in this case, we need to know if we are a local instance of this character. So we're going to grab our, we could grab our character base, and we could check if we are locally controlled. So drag off here is locally controlled. And if we are, we can get our HUD. And we can simply call the update XP and update level function again. There we go. And with that out of the way, we probably want to make sure that we actually save our XP as well. And to do that, we're going to create a function on our player controller. So let's open up our shooter player controller. Let me see. Do we have a function in here? No, we don't. So let's go to the framework folder, shooter player controller. And I'm going to create a function or an event and call this save XP and level. And we do not need to worry about replication because we are going to call this from our local pawn. So we are on the local player controller, and that's the only one that has access to the local save game. So that's correct. The first thing I'm going to do in here is get a retriggerable delay. So I do not want to save this like 10 times a second for every bullet that hits, for example. So every time this delay gets triggered, it will reset to the duration. So it will keep a little like buffer at the end after saving to check if another save call comes in, and then it will reset the timer. So this will make sure it doesn't execute like 10 times a second. So I'm going to set this to something like 0.5. And then all I'm going to do is grab my player save game. So we need to get this saved as a variable over here. In begin play, we have our save game profile, and we want to right click and promote to variable and make sure that we hook up the setter over here. And now that we have that as a variable, we can drag it out here, and we can set our player profile, and we want to set it to the player profile that's stored on this player controller. So drag that in and plug it into the setter. And then we simply want to save the game to slot. So save game to slot. And you want to make sure that you use the correct slot name again. So you should have it over here as well, the player profile slot. And plug it in here. So if we call this, this will make sure that we save the XP and level. So what do we want to do? We want to simply call it over here, save XP and level. So we already made sure we are local, so that's good to go. Compile and save this. So this is the component for now. So let's close it down and let's go to our character folder, and I'm going to grab my base character and add a new component, and that's going to be my XP component. And with the component in place over here, all I want to do is go to my begin play event. So let me see. Multicast begin play, and I want to call my XP component init. So I'm going to grab my XP component and I'm going to call the init function that we created, plug it in here. So this is a multicast, so this will also execute on all instances of the character. So compile and save, and that should be good. So let's wrap it up by adding some reset XP and things like that, so we can properly test all of this. So let's quickly add a button to our main menu so we can quickly reset our XP if we want to. So let's open the main menu widget, and I'm going to grab my quit game button and duplicate it. And the duplicated button, I'm gonna drag it outside of that border, and I'm gonna simply put it at the bottom right of the screen over here. And let's make sure that we rename it. So this is going to be my reset XP button. And for the text is going to be reset XP. And then let's make sure that it's actually priced properly. So something like this. That's fine. Let's compile and save and go into the graph. We need to create a function on our game instance. So let's open up the game instance, and in here I'm going to create a new custom event to reset my XP. So let's make a bit of room. Custom event reset XP, and we probably want to do the same thing as we did over here for the player name. So we can copy and paste all of that stuff, and we want to make sure that we reset pretty much all of it, because if we reset our XP, then we might end up with characters or weapons that we have selected that we may or may not have unlocked yet. So later we're going to add unlocking, and that will make sure that we do not have things selected that we cannot select. So there we go. So this is our reset XP function. Compile and save it, and then go back to our main menu and grab an onClicked event for the button. Grab our game instance, call our reset XP function, and that's good to go. Now that we have this out of the way, I want to quickly go into my game instance and go into the main menu function. So UI show main menu, and this kind of bothers me, so I don't know why, but I'm gonna fix this. So it's not really broken, but whatever. So I'm gonna grab this check for save game profile and plug it in right at the beginning over here. And then over here we're setting the player name, and I do not want to do this inside of the game instance. I just want to do it inside of the widget. So I'm gonna get rid of that part and go back into the main menu widget. And then for the main menu on construct, I'm simply gonna do it in here. So I'm gonna grab the player the profile from the instance. So get player profile. Split it over here, and then I'm going to simply grab the input player name box and set the text and plug in the player name over here. So it just makes a little bit more sense. Nothing was really broken, but I just wanted to get that out of the way. It bugged me. So we have that done as well. Let's make a little info card that we can plug in each menu there where we want to display our XP values. So first of all, let's go into the in-game HUD, and we're going to copy all of the stuff that we created. So the image rank icon and the border with the XP information, I'm going to right click and copy it. So let's create a new widget, user interface widget blueprint, user widget, and this is my widget blueprint info card XP, and open it up. Now first let's paste all of the stuff that we copied, and I don't really want a canvas panel, to be honest, so we might want to get rid of all of the stuff. So first let's add a border in here, and inside the border let's add a vertical box, and inside that vertical box let's paste all of the stuff that we had. So let's see, did that work out correctly? I think it did. So for the first border, let's make sure that it's just a transparent border. And now for my image rank icon, I want to make the size to centered over here, and make sure that it's set to 100 by 90 over, so like this. And then we can grab the border over here and set it to fill. And we want to do the same thing for the vertical boxes inside here, or the borders inside there, I'm sorry. So let's grab those borders and set them to fill as well. I'm sorry. So the first border needs to be fill, and then expanded both horizontally and vertically. And the second border, you want to set it to auto, and then vertically to the bottom and then expand it horizontally. So there we go. All this widget stuff is pretty annoying. So this is the info card widget that we're going to use. Now let's go into the graph and set up the graph for it. So it's not really that complicated. First of all, we're going to grab our game instance at event construct. So we're going to use this in the menus so we can get our information from the game instance in this case. And we're going to cast it to our shooter game instance. And we want to promote it to a variable. And then we're going to create a function to update all the information. So let's create a function in here, call it update xp info. And then let's grab our shooter game instance and we're going to grab our player profile and split it. And then we can simply set all of the correct values. So let's grab our text XP amount and set the text. Plug it in here, and if we plug in the XP amount, it will convert it for us. And I'm going to disable grouping again. So there we go. Then we can copy and paste this for the XP level. So we want to change the XP level text over here and plug in the correct value from the structure. And then we can also update our rank icon. So for that we need our XP and level structure again. So we could simply add it as a variable, structure XP and levels. And that's the XP and level structure. Then we can grab it in here and split it, grab our images array and get a copy, get it from the level index, and that's the image that we want to use. So we're going to grab our rank icon and set the brush by texture, plug it in here, and that's good to go as well. So now we can return and make sure that we call this function on construct as well. So update info, compile and save. And then we also want to set this function to be called inside the menus where we place it. No, that's not true because it will automatically call event construct, so that's not an issue. So we're simply going to go to our main menu, for example, and then we can add a user created widget and we can drag in our info card XP right at the bottom over here. So I'm going to anchor it to the bottom right, and then let's say minus 165 minus 320. And then I'm going to do the same thing in the other menus. So close it down. And if we go to our lobby menu, we could add it in here as well. So grab our info card XP and anchor it to the bottom right. Minus 165 minus 320. And that's good. And we could also add it to the character menu. So open up the character menu and again add our user created info card XP, anchor it to the bottom right and align it in the same way, so minus 320, and that should pretty much line up. So I think most of this stuff should work, and we could have a little look, and then if all of it works, then we could make a little UI animation if we level up, and that should be all for today. So let's see if this is working. So we actually have the information in our main menu. That's fine. Let's host the game and let's start it single player first to see if anything actually happens. And there's an issue right away, so the HUD doesn't update. So let's see if anything happens if I walk into the trigger, and nothing happens as well. And we have a bunch of errors. Okay, so this is not good. Let me see. So probably most of it is in the HUD. Okay, so I'm grabbing the menu controller over here, and obviously we are in game, so we are not a menu controller, we are a shooter controller. So we want to grab the owning player on pre-construct and cast it to the shooter player controller. That's my bad. Plug it in here and promote this to a variable. So then we can go into the update XP amount and XP level functions and make sure that we replace this. So let's get our shooter player controller and let's get the player profile from here and split this, plug it in over here, and then we can get rid of the menu controller and do the same thing in the level function. So grab the shooter controller, get the player profile, split it, and plug in the XP amount, the level, I'm sorry, into both of these pins. And with that setup, we can also get rid of the menu controller variable because we do not need it. So let's see what happens now. Multiplayer, host game, start game. That looks a little bit better. So now we actually have the correct information on the HUD. Let's see if it updates. And obviously it doesn't. So that's nice. So let me check what's wrong with that. Okay, that kind of makes sense. We didn't actually set up the interface function on the character. So we need to open up our character, base character. And I showed the interface function earlier, so we want to double click this so it creates the event, and we need to set it up. And that's really simple because all we need to do is call our XP component add XP function. So grab in our XP component and call add XP and plug in the pins just like this. So let's see if anything happens this time. Third time's the charm usually for me. So we need to go into the main menu and give it a go, host it and launch the game. And now hopefully this works. So this should add 300 to my XP. There we go. And if I walk in here a second time, I would also level up to level 2. And for the left trigger, it should add 1500 XP, so that would make me go up a few levels at once. And there we go. So I'm level 5 right now. So that seems to be working. We need to work on the alignment of the rank icon a little bit, but that's not the biggest issue. So at least this is good. And now we need to make sure that this works in multiplayer as well. So let's grab in a second client and let's see what happens. So host it. And then join the game. So to make sure that the HUD updates for the client and things like that, we're gonna give this a quick test. So this time I'm the client, and the client can also gain XP and level up, so that's good. And that's also good. Now I do notice that this doesn't actually save to our save game, so we need to make sure that that works. So let's see what's wrong with that. So if I close it down, open it again, I'm back to level 1. So what's wrong with that? So again, I forgot something. In the XP component, we need to make sure that we call our save event. So we're gonna grab our shooter player controller. So this is our add XP event in the XP component. And over here we check if we are locally controlled. So that means we are on the local controller, and then we can save our XP and level. So we can plug it in over here. And this should make sure that it also saves. So if I would go to host the game and start a game, so I'm not gonna bother adding a second player right now, that doesn't really matter. So let me see, I'm gonna level up and then close it down. And if I open it back up, this time I'm back at level 4, so that's good to go as well. So now all I want to show is how to make a little UI animation for when we level up, and then that's all for today. So let's make a little UI animation. I'm going to open my in-game HUD, and first of all I want to drag in a border in here, and let's give it a little bit of room. So I'm going to resize it to something like 400 by 200. And anchor it to the center of the screen. Then I want to align it, so let's make this 0, and then I'm gonna put it up a little bit, -350, and the alignment horizontally is going to be 0.5. Now the brush color, I just want to make it transparent, so let's give it all zeros in here. Then I'm gonna grab a vertical box and drop it on top of my border. And inside the vertical box, the first thing I'm gonna do is drag in some text. And for this text, I'm simply going to call this my level up text. So I'm going to select it and type in level up with an exclamation mark, and make sure that I center it. So it's going to be italic, and it could be, well, the size is fine. Let's not make this too complicated. So let's drag in an image and let's drop it on top of the vertical box as well. This is going to be my level up icon, so let's call it image level up icon. It's a variable, that's fine, and I want to set the brush, so I'm gonna set it to my rank icon 1 so I can see what's happening, and I want to resize it to 100 by 90, and then for the alignment, align it to the center like this, so it actually uses the correct size. Then I'm going to duplicate the text, and the second text I want to put it below the image, and this text should be a variable, so I'm going to call this my text level up level. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but whatever. And then this is going to be the new level, so level 2 for example. We can change this text later, so we need to make it a variable. Then I'm going to grab this border and give it a proper name as well, so border level up, and that's a variable as well. Now to make a little UI animation, I'm going to select the border first, and I'm going to go to the content over here, color and opacity, and set it to 0, so it's actually gone. Now I want to go to the window over here and open the animation tab. So this brings up this new animation window, and I'm going to create a new animation. So this is my UI level up animation. And make sure that you select it over here. Now there's multiple ways you can do this. You can add tracks for things that you want to edit, but you can also use the buttons over here in the details panel. So if I would select my border over here, and I'm actually at time 0, then I'm going to add a keyframe for the alpha of the content and opacity. And adding a keyframe, you can do this with the little button at the end over here. So simply add a keyframe and you'll see the tracks pop up over here. So I want to make this appear, so let's make it something like 0.75 seconds. Then I'm going to set the alpha to 1 and add another keyframe by pressing the button here. And then I'm going to wait, so something like 2 seconds 25, and over here I'm going to add another keyframe, and then at 3 seconds I want to put the alpha back to 0 and add another keyframe. So nothing really exciting, it will just smoothly blend in and out, and we have an animation for that. So we can use this UI animation in our graph. So compile and save it, and let's go to the graph. And let me grab my example. So I'm going to create a function to play the level up animation. So let's create a new function and call it play UI anim level up. And then first we want to get our current level. So we're going to grab our shooter player controller, and we're going to grab our player profile again. Split this over here. Split struct pin, there we go. Then I want to set the text for the level up. So I have a text level up level over here. So grab this one and set the text. And we do not want to simply plug in the integer, but we want to give it a little bit of looks. So I'm going to add a format text node, and then I'm going to say the new level is my level, and then open bracket a close bracket, and this will create a wildcard, and for the wildcard I can use the level. So this will turn this into level 2 or level 3 or whatever level we are. So that's the text for my level up, and I also want to set my rank icon. So I need to get my XP and level structure in here and split it, and get this array of images and get the correct index from here. And then we want to set our image level up icon, so not the rank icon but the level up icon, and set the brush from texture, plug it in here, set the correct texture, and that's good to go. And then we want to play our UI animation, and if we look at the left side over here at the variables, it's in here as a variable, so we can simply drag it in, drag off here and do play animation. And that's good to go. This will play the animation for us, and we can select to restore the widgets in the previous state if the animation is done. So you could enable that, and then grab a return node, and that's good to go. And now all we need to do is make sure that we call this function if we level up. So we can go to our XP component, character XP component. And over here we have the branch. If we are a local controlled pawn, then we want to display this animation if we leveled up. So we can grab the boolean from here and add another branch, plug it in over here, and if we leveled up we want to get our HUD again, so get in-game HUD, and from here we can play the UI animation by calling the function that we just created. So we are locally over here, so this should work. So compile, save, and give it a little go. Multiplayer, host game, and let's start a game. So if I walk into the trigger, we should see the animation play. There we go, level up, level 5. So that's all I have for you today. It's a bit of a long video again, I'm afraid. I think it's a cool one. I like leveling up. It gives a bit of a progression feeling, and it's always cool to unlock new stuff. So hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider leaving a like. You're welcome to join the GameDev Raw Discord to ask questions or show your own projects or things like that. And that should be all for today. So thanks for watching. Talk to you later.